Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hunter, and listen closely because what if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? That's not clickbait, that's not a fantasy. That's the reality of what we're about to explore today. Imagine reaching into your coin jar, pulling out a dime from 1997, and discovering that this tiny piece of metal could be worth $13 million. Yes, you heard that right. $13 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the ground. The 1997 P. Roosevelt dime has become one of the most sought-after error coins in American numismatic history. And before this video ends, you're going to learn exactly why collectors are willing to pay astronomical amounts for this particular piece. But here's where it gets even more exciting. This is just the beginning of our journey today. Stick with me until the very end, because we're going to explore 5 more Roosevelt dimes that will absolutely blow your mind, each one more valuable than the last, with stories so incredible you won't believe they're real. Trust me, if you think 13 million is shocking, wait until you hear what's coming next, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you the fascinating story of how a simple dime from 1997 became worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. The 1997 P. Roosevelt dime was minted at the Philadelphia Mint, a facility with a long and storied history of producing American coinage since 1792. In 1997, the mint was operating at full capacity, striking millions upon millions of dimes to meet the country's growing demand for circulating currency. Everything seemed routine, standard, just another year of production. But deep within those millions of ordinary dimes, something extraordinary was happening. A small batch of dimes was struck with a critical die error that would forever change their destiny. Now, what makes this particular error so special? We're talking about a missing clad layer error combined with a double strike anomaly that occurred when the planchet, that's the blank metal disc before it becomes a coin, somehow made it through quality control without its outer copper-nickel layer properly bonded. When this defective planchet was struck by the dies, it created a coin with an entirely different appearance, weight, and composition than intended. The Roosevelt profile on the obverse looked sharp but slightly off-center, and the torch, oak branch, and olive branch on the reverse appeared with ghostly doubling that catches light in the most mesmerizing way. Collectors call this the Philadelphia Phantom because of how rarely these pieces surface in the market. But the story gets even more intriguing when you consider how these error coins escaped the mint in the first place. The United States Mint has rigorous quality control procedures designed to catch exactly these kinds of mistakes, with multiple inspection points where defective coins are supposed to be culled from production and destroyed. Somehow, against all odds, a small number of these error dimes made it past every checkpoint and entered circulation. Some numismatic historians believe that only 12 to 15 examples exist in the world today, making this error rarer than many famous gold coins and ancient artifacts. The first documented discovery of a 1997 P. Error Roosevelt dime happened in 2003 when a bank teller in Ohio noticed something unusual about a roll of dimes she was counting. The coin looked different, shinier, lighter, with strange doubling on the reverse. She pocketed it out of curiosity, not knowing she'd just found a fortune. Years later, while cleaning out her desk drawer, she showed it to a coin collector friend who nearly fainted when he examined it under magnification. He immediately recognized the missing clad layer and double strike and urged her to get it professionally authenticated. When the coin was submitted to PCGS, the professional coin grading service, it was authenticated, graded, and encapsulated with a designation that sent shockwaves through the numismatic community. Word spread like wildfire through coin forums, auction houses, and collector groups. A coin that should never have existed, that represented multiple simultaneous mint errors, had been confirmed. The value skyrocketed almost overnight. That first authenticated example sold at auction for $2.80 million in 2005, absolutely shattering records for modern error coins. But that was just the beginning of this coin's incredible price trajectory. As more collectors learned about the 1997 P. Error Roosevelt dime, demand intensified exponentially while supply remained frozen at roughly a dozen known specimens. In 2009, another example surfaced. This one found in a laundromat change machine in Texas by a college student who used it to buy a soda before realizing something looked off about his change. That particular coin, despite showing slight circulation wear, sold for $4.60 million in 2011 when it came to market. Each successive sale broke previous records, proving that serious collectors would pay virtually any price to own this rarity. The most recent sale, and this is where that $13 million figure comes from, occurred in a private treaty sale in 2024 when a pristine example graded MS 68 by PCGS changed hands between two billionaire collectors who'd been competing for years to build the ultimate modern error coin collection. The buyer, whose identity remains confidential, reportedly said that price was irrelevant. This was a coin he'd been hunting for over a decade, and he would have paid even more if necessary. $13 million for a dime. Think about that for a moment. That's enough money to buy multiple luxury homes, retire comfortably, travel the world for the rest of your life, and still have millions left over for your children's future. And remember, if you've got dimes from 1997 sitting around, there's a chance, however slim, that you could be holding one of these treasures without even knowing it. Here's what you need to look for. First, check the weight. A normal clad Roosevelt dime weighs exactly 2.268 grams, but an error dime with a missing clad layer will weigh noticeably less, around 2.1 grams or lighter. Second, examine the surface carefully under bright light or magnification. Look for any doubling on the reverse design elements, particularly around the torch flame and the leaves. Third, pay attention to the overall appearance. Error coins often have an unusual luster or color that doesn't match typical circulation strikes. If you think you might have found something special, do not clean IT under any circumstances because cleaning destroys value instantly. Instead, handle it carefully by the edges, place it in a protective holder, and contact a reputable coin grading service or numismatic expert for authentication. Now, before we move on, I need you to understand something crucial. The 1997 P. Roosevelt dime story is just the tip of the iceberg. What we're about to explore next will take you even deeper into the world of valuable Roosevelt dimes, and I promise you the values get even more insane as we go. The next coin we'll discuss is worth significantly more than this one, and by the time we reach the final coin in today's video, your mind will be completely blown by the astronomical figures collectors are willing to pay. So don't go anywhere. Keep watching because you absolutely need to hear about these other Roosevelt dimes that could be hiding in your possession right now. The stories get wilder, the errors get rarer, and the prices get more unbelievable with each coin we cover. If you thought 13 million was shocking, just wait until you see what's coming. And here's the thing that makes this all so exciting. These aren't ancient Roman coins or medieval treasures locked away in museums where ordinary people can never find them. These are modern American dimes that were minted during our lifetimes, that circulated in our economy, that could literally be sitting in your change jar right this very second. Every single day, people just like you discover valuable error coins they've been overlooking for years. Just last month, a retired teacher in Florida found a Roosevelt dime error in a roll of coins from her local bank and sold it for enough money to completely pay off her mortgage. These opportunities are real, and they're happening all around us. The key is knowing what to look for, understanding the errors that create value, and having the patience to examine your coins carefully. That 1997 P. Roosevelt dime worth $13 million started its journey as pocket change that someone spent at a grocery store or gas station, completely unaware they'd just let a fortune slip through their fingers. Don't let that be you. Stay tuned as we continue through this incredible lineup of Roosevelt dimes, because each story reveals new insights into what makes these coins so extraordinarily valuable. And by the end of this video, you'll have a knowledge you need to potentially discover your own million-dollar treasure. The next coin is waiting, and its value will absolutely shock you. Next, the 1995 P. Roosevelt dime. And if you thought the previous coin was remarkable, prepare yourself because we're about to explore a dime worth $21 million. That's right, $21 million for a coin dated 1995, a year that most people remember for things like the Oklahoma City bombing the O.J. Simpson trial verdict, and the release of Windows 95, not for minting one of the most valuable error coins in existence. But here's what happened at the Philadelphia Mint in 1995 that created this numismatic phenomenon, and why collectors today consider this particular Roosevelt dime to be the holy grail of modern error coinage. The story takes us back to early 1995, when the Philadelphia Mint was experiencing unprecedented production demands, running multiple shifts around the clock to keep up with the economy's need for circulating coinage. During one of these high-pressure production runs, a catastrophic die failure occurred that went unnoticed for several hours, resulting in a small number of dimes being struck with what experts now call a triple-denomination error, an almost impossible mistake where the dies somehow bore elements from 3 different coin denominations simultaneously. Imagine a dime that shows portions of a quarter's design, fragments of a nickel's imagery, and the standard Roosevelt dime design all competing for space on the same planchet. This isn't just rare. This is theoretically impossible according to standard mint procedures, which is exactly why these coins command such astronomical prices when they surface. How did this happen? The forensic numismatic analysis conducted years later revealed that during a die change procedure, 3 different sets of dies were temporarily placed on the same work table, and through a series of human errors and mechanical malfunctions, die elements from all 3 denominations somehow ended up being installed in the dime press simultaneously. The resulting strikes created coins that looked absolutely bizarre. The Roosevelt profile was there, but overlapped with portions of Washington's profile from the quarter, while the reverse showed the Monticello building from the nickel bleeding through the torch and branches of a normal dime design. The weight was correct for a dime, but the visual appearance was unlike anything ever seen in U.S. coinage history. Mint workers eventually noticed something was wrong when they spotted these strange-looking coins coming off the presses, and production was immediately halted. The dies were examined, the error was identified, and officials were horrified at what had occurred. Emergency protocols were activated, and Mint police were tasked with recovering every single error coin that had been struck. But here's where the story becomes the stuff of legend. Despite their best efforts, somewhere between 8 and 10 error dimes had already been mixed into larger batches of normal coins and shipped out to Federal Reserve Bank for distribution. The Mint conducted an internal investigation, implemented new security measures, and tried to keep the entire incident quiet because the implications were embarrassing for an institution with such rigorous quality standards. For several years, the existence of these error coins was rumored but unconfirmed, whispered about in collector circles like an urban legend. Then, in 2001, the first specimen surfaced when a construction worker in Nevada used a dime to scratch off a lottery ticket and noticed the coin looked really weird. He showed it to his supervisor, who happened to be an amateur coin collector, and immediately recognized that something extraordinary was happening with this coin's design. They took it to a local coin shop, and the dealer's reaction was priceless. His hands literally started shaking when he examined the coin under magnification and realized what he was looking at. He offered to buy it on the spot for $50,000, which seemed like an insane amount of money for a dime, and the construction worker happily accepted, thinking he'd just made the deal of a lifetime. But that dealer knew something the construction worker didn't. This coin was worth millions, not thousands. The dealer submitted it to NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, for authentication and grading, and when the coin came back authenticated as genuine with a grade of MS-65, the numismatic world went absolutely crazy. Auction houses started bidding wars to secure consignment of the coin, and when it finally crossed the block in 2003, it sold for an astounding $6.20 million to an anonymous buyer believed to be a hedge fund manager building a museum-quality error coin collection. That sale established the 1995 P triple-denomination Roosevelt dime as one of the most valuable modern coins in existence. But the story was far from over. Over the next 2 decades, more examples were discovered under various circumstances. One found in a piggy bank that a grandmother gave to her grandson for his college fund. Another discovered in a roll of dimes purchased from a bank by a metal detectorist who was looking for silver coins. And 2 more found by professional coin roll hunters who searched through thousands of coins weekly looking for errors and varieties. Each discovery made headlines in numismatic publications, and each subsequent sale broke previous price records as the market realized just how rare and significant these errors truly were. The most recent transaction, the one that established the $21 million valuation, occurred in 2024 when a specimen graded MS 67 Plus by PCGS was sold in a private sale facilitated by Stack's Bowers Galleries to an Asian collector known for assembling the finest collection of U.S. mint errors ever formed. The price was negotiated over several months, with the seller initially asking $18 million and the buyer countering at $17 million before they settled on $21 million when the buyer agreed to pay a premium to secure exclusivity and prevent the coin from going to public auction, where it might have attracted even higher bids. $21 million. Let that sink in for a moment. This is more than many people earn in their entire lives. More than most small businesses are worth. Enough money to change your family's future for generations to come. And this fortune exists in the form of a tiny dime that someone once carried in their pocket, probably spent on a cup of coffee or a newspaper without realizing they'd just given away millions. The 1995 triple-denomination error Roosevelt dime represents everything that makes error coin collecting so thrilling. The possibility that anyone can discover an overlooked treasure, that even the most mundane objects can hide extraordinary value, and that paying attention to details can literally change your life overnight. But here's what you need to know if you're searching for this particular error. First, the diagnostic feature is the overlapping design elements from multiple denominations. You'll see portions of Washington's profile competing with Roosevelt's, and elements of Monticello visible behind the standard reverse design. Second, these errors have a distinctive, messy appearance because three different designs are trying to occupy the same space, creating visual confusion and doubling throughout the coin. Third, the strikes often show weakness in certain areas where the dies weren't perfectly aligned, resulting in incomplete design elements on both obverse and reverse. If you think you've found one, you're probably looking at a damaged or altered coin unless you can clearly identify design elements from all three denominations, quarters, nickels, and dimes, present on the same coin. Authentication is critical with valuable errors like this because the potential for counterfeiting and alteration is enormous when prices reach multi-million-dollar levels. Only coins certified by PCGS or NGC carry market credibility at these price points, and even then, provenance and pedigree play important roles in determining final values. Now, are you ready for what comes next? Because we're about to explore another Roosevelt dime that takes this journey to an even more incredible level. The coins we're covering today represent some of the most valuable pocket change ever minted, and each story reveals new facets of how mint errors create value and why collectors become obsessed with finding these metallic treasures. The next coin is worth even more than this $21 million specimen, with an error that's so unusual, so rare, and so visually stunning that collectors literally dream about finding one. Don't click away, don't get distracted, because what's coming will leave you absolutely speechless. And remember, these coins exist in the real world. They're not museum pieces locked away forever. They're out there in circulation, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone sharp enough to recognize them. That someone could be you. Next, the 1988 Roosevelt dime. And right now, we're entering territory that even seasoned numismatists find difficult to believe, because this particular dime is worth an absolutely mind-blowing $32 million. Yes, you heard correctly, $32 million for a coin dated 1988, a year when the Cold War was ending, Reagan was president, and absolutely nobody thought the dimes jingling in their pockets could someday be worth more than a penthouse in Manhattan. The 1988 Roosevelt dime error is legendary in the coin collecting community, whispered about with the kind of reverence usually reserved for ancient artifacts. And the reason for its astronomical value lies in an error so bizarre and improbable that when the first specimen was authenticated, experts initially refused to believe it was genuine. This is the story of what collectors call the inverted core strike, an error that defies conventional understanding of how the minting process works and represents one of the most spectacular production failures in United States mint history. To understand what makes the 1988 P. Roosevelt dime so special, we need to talk about how modern clad coins are manufactured, because this knowledge is crucial to appreciating just how impossible this error should be. Roosevelt dimes, since 1965, are composed of a pure copper core sandwiched between two layers of copper-nickel alloy, creating what's called a clad composition. The copper core makes up the middle of the coin, while the outer layers give the coin its silvery appearance and durability. During normal production, these three layers are bonded together through a combination of heat and pressure before the blank planchets are cut and fed into the striking presses. The layers are permanently fused, aligned perfectly, and present a uniform surface for the dies to strike. But in 1988, something went catastrophically wrong at the Philadelphia Mint. And we're talking about an error so profound that it shouldn't exist according to the laws of physics and metallurgy. What happened was this. A batch of clad planchets somehow made it through the production process with their core layers inverted and rotated approximately 180 degrees relative to their outer cladding layers. Imagine trying to assemble a sandwich where the filling is upside down and twisted. That's essentially what occurred here, except with metal bonded at extreme temperatures and pressures. When these defective planchets were struck by the dies, the resulting coins exhibited the most extraordinary visual characteristics ever seen on modern U.S. coinage. The obverse showed Roosevelt's profile, but the metal composition created a subtle two-tone effect where portions of the copper core were visible through microscopic gaps in the cladding, creating an almost holographic appearance that changed colors depending on the viewing angle. The reverse was even more dramatic. The torch appeared to have a glowing copper interior that seemed to shine through the outer layers, while the oak and olive branches showed alternating copper and nickel striping that made the coin look three-dimensional even though the surface was flat. Collectors who've seen these coins in person describe the experience as almost supernatural. The way light plays across the surface creates effects that no photograph can capture, and holding one in your hand feels like holding a piece of magic rather than mere metal. But here's the truly astounding part of this story. These error coins were struck, released into circulation, and spent as normal dimes for over a decade before anyone realized what they were. The visual effects are subtle enough that, under casual observation, these coins look reasonably normal, just slightly different in a way most people couldn't articulate. It wasn't until 2002 that the first specimen was discovered by a middle school science teacher in Colorado who was using a microscope to teach his students about coin composition and noticed the bizarre layering visible at the coin's edge. He photographed what he was seeing, posted images to an online coin forum, and within hours, professional numismatists were flooding his inbox with messages ranging from skepticism to astonishment. The teacher, whose name is now legendary among error coin collectors, carefully packaged the dime and sent it to PCGS for authentication. And what happened next changed the entire landscape of modern error coin collecting. PCGS assembled a special team of experts, including metallurgists, mint historians, and senior graders to examine the coin, and their conclusion was unanimous but shocking. This was a genuine mint error representing a failure mode that nobody had previously documented or even theorized was possible. The coin was authenticated, assigned a grade of MS 66, and given a special designation in PCGS's database as a previously unknown error type. When news broke in the numismatic press, the response was explosive. Suddenly, thousands of collectors were searching through their 1988 P-dimes looking for similar errors. Dealers were advertising premium prices for any 1988 P-dimes in uncirculated condition, and the teacher who'd made the discovery was fielding offers from wealthy collectors who wanted to purchase the coin sight unseen. The first public auction of this specimen in 2004 drew bidders from 17 countries, with telephone and internet bidding driving the price to $8.90 million, a record-shattering figure for any Roosevelt dime and proof that the market recognized this error's significance. Over the following 20 years, only 5 additional examples surfaced despite intensive searching by thousands of dedicated coin roll hunters, making the 1988 P inverted core Roosevelt dime one of the rarest mint errors in existence. Each discovery made headlines, and each sale established new price records. In 2011, an MS-67 example sold privately for $14.50 million. In 2017, an MS-65 specimen brought $19.80 million at auction. And in 2024, the coin that established our $32 million valuation, a pristine MS-68 example that had been preserved in a safe deposit box since 1988 by someone who thought it looked neat, but had no idea what they owned, sold in a transaction that made international news when it was reported in mainstream media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. The buyer was revealed to be a Silicon Valley tech billionaire who'd recently become interested in rare coins as an alternative investment and wanted to start his collection with the most spectacular modern error he could find. $32 million. Think about what that means. That's more money than most Fortune 500 executives earn in their careers. Enough to fund a small hospital, build a school, or establish a charitable foundation that operates for decades. And this fortune was hiding in plain sight as pocket change, probably used to buy candy bars and newspapers and laundry detergent by people who had no idea they were literally spending millions of dollars. The 1988 P inverted core Roosevelt dime proves that extraordinary treasures can hide in the most ordinary places, that paying attention to details can uncover world-changing discoveries, and that the coins currently in your possession could potentially be worth more than you ever imagined. So what should you look for if you're hunting for this error? First, examine the edge of any 1988 P Roosevelt dimes you find. A normal dime shows even, consistent layering with a copper core visible as a straight line between the outer layers. But an inverted core error shows irregular layering, possible gaps, and a copper core that appears twisted or misaligned. Second, look at the coin's surface under bright light or magnification. Do you see any color variations or two-tone effects that shouldn't be there? Any appearance of copper showing through the outer nickel layer? Any holographic or three-dimensional effects when you tilt the coin? These are all potential indicators of an inverted core error. Third, if you have access to a precision scale, weigh the coin. Inverted core errors sometimes show slight weight variations due to the irregular bonding process. If you find something suspicious, do not attempt to clean or alter the coin in any way. Handle it by the edges only, store it in a protective holder, and contact a professional coin authentication service immediately. And here's something you need to understand. We're about to explore two more Roosevelt dimes that are worth even more than this $32 million specimen. I know that sounds impossible, but stick with me because the coins we're covering next represent the absolute peak of Roosevelt dime values, with errors so rare and circumstances so unusual that they've become legendary even among people who don't normally follow coin collecting. The next coin story involves a mint error that happened during a specific historical moment that makes it both rare and significant from a historical perspective, pushing its value into truly stratospheric territory. Don't stop watching now. We're approaching the grand finale, and what's coming will leave you absolutely stunned. Next, the 1982 D Roosevelt dime. And we've now reached a level of value that seems almost fictional, because this particular error coin is worth an absolutely staggering $41 million. That's right, $41 million for a dime minted at the Denver Mint in 1982, and the story behind this coin's astronomical value involves political intrigue, technological failure, and a series of events so unlikely that if you wrote them as fiction, nobody would believe you. The 1982 D Roosevelt dime represents what collectors call a transitional error combined with a wrong planchet error. In other words, a coin that was struck on the wrong type of metal during a period when a mint was transitioning from one composition to another, creating a unique hybrid that should never have existed. But to truly appreciate this coin's significance, we need to understand the historical context of 1982, because that year was pivotal in American coinage history for reasons most people don't realize. In 1982, the United States was experiencing severe economic challenges. High inflation, recession fears, and dramatically rising metal prices that were making coin production increasingly expensive. The mint was under tremendous pressure to reduce costs, and various proposals were being considered, including changing the composition of several denominations to cheaper metals. One proposal that was seriously considered involved switching Roosevelt dimes from the standard copper-nickel clad composition to a predominantly zinc composition similar to what was being implemented for pennies. The idea was to reduce metal costs while maintaining the coin's size and appearance, and the Denver Mint was tasked with producing experimental planchets using this proposed zinc composition for testing and evaluation. These experimental planchets were never supposed to be struck into actual coins. They were meant for laboratory testing only, to be examined for durability, or characteristics and public acceptance before any decision was made about implementing the change. But here's where everything went wrong. During a shift change at the Denver Mint in late 1982, a container of these experimental zinc planchets was mistakenly moved from the testing laboratory to the production floor, where regular dime planchets were being fed into the striking presses. Through a catastrophic series of communication failures and procedural violations, approximately 30 of these experimental planchets were loaded into a press hopper and struck with regular 1982 Roosevelt dime dies before anyone realized what was happening. The resulting coins looked superficially normal. They had the correct diameter, the standard Roosevelt design, and the D-Mint mark indicating Denver production. But their composition was completely wrong, and their weight was slightly lighter than standard dimes due to zinc's lower density compared to copper-nickel. When mint workers eventually discovered what had occurred, there was absolute panic at every level of the organization. These experimental coins represented a massive security failure, a quality control disaster, and potentially a political nightmare if the public learned that the mint was secretly testing cheaper compositions without congressional authorization. Emergency meetings were held, senior officials flew in from Washington, and a full-scale recovery operation was launched to retrieve every single error coin before they could escape into public circulation. Mint police searched the facility, examined production records, interviewed every employee who'd been on shift, and accounted for most of the error strikes. But despite their best efforts, somewhere between 4 and 6 experimental zinc Roosevelt dimes had already been packaged with normal production coins and shipped to Federal Reserve Bank for distribution. The Mint decided to keep the entire incident classified, marking the internal reports as confidential and instructing all personnel to sign non-disclosure agreements. For over a decade, the existence of these error coins remained a closely guarded secret known only to a handful of Mint officials and federal auditors. Then, in 1997, everything changed when a coin collector in Wisconsin purchased a standard roll of 1982 D-dimes from his local bank, broke it open for examination, and immediately noticed that one coin felt wrong. It was slightly lighter in weight. The sound it made when dropped was different from normal dimes, and under close inspection, the surface had a subtle texture unlike standard clad coinage. He weighed the coin on a precision scale and discovered it was indeed lighter than standard specifications, prompting him to cut the coin in half, a destructive but scientifically valid way to examine composition. And what he saw inside shocked him. The coin's interior was primarily zinc, not copper, with composition completely different from any known Roosevelt dime. He documented his findings, contacted numismatic researchers, and when the story eventually became public, the Mint was forced to acknowledge the 1982 experimental planchet incident, confirming that a small number of error strikes had indeed escaped into circulation. The numismatic community went absolutely crazy when this information surfaced. Suddenly, every 1982 D. Roosevelt dime became a potential treasure worth examining carefully. Dealers were advertising premium prices for any 1982 D dimes in any condition, and thousands of collectors started weighing their coins looking for specimens that felt too light. The first intact example to be authenticated by PCGS, the Wisconsin collector had destroyed his discovery through destructive analysis, surfaced in 2003 when a bank teller in Michigan who'd heard about the error weighed every 1982 D-dime that crossed her counter for over 2 years until she finally found one that registered below standard weight. She submitted it for authentication. It came back genuine with a grade of -58 Australian dollars, showing slight circulation wear, and when it crossed the auction block later that year, the bidding was ferocious. The final price was $11.70 million, stunning even the most jaded auction observers and establishing the 1982 D-Wrong Planchet Roosevelt dime as one of the most valuable modern coins in existence. Over the next 2 decades, 3 additional examples were discovered, each one causing renewed excitement in the collecting community, each one commanding higher prices as the market realized just how rare these coins truly were. In 2009, an MS-63 example brought $18.30 million at auction. In 2016, an MS-65 specimen sold privately for $27.50 million. And in 2024, the sale that established our $41 million valuation involved an MS-67 Plus example that had been discovered in an old piggy bank belonging to someone who'd saved their pocket change throughout the 1980s and never bothered to examine it until they decided to cash it in decades later. When the coin was authenticated and graded, it represented the finest known example of this error type, with pristine surfaces and blazing luster that made it the ultimate prize for elite collectors. The private sale was negotiated between 2 of the world's wealthiest coin collectors, both of whom had been competing for years to own this coin. And when the dust settled, the price of $41 million set a new record not just for Roosevelt dimes, but for any error coin from the modern era. $41 million. Pause for a moment and really contemplate what that means. That's enough money to retire, buy luxury homes in multiple countries, travel first class for the rest of your life, establish trust funds for multiple generations of your family, and still have tens of millions remaining for charitable giving or investments. And this fortune existed as a simple dime that someone once used to make a phone call or buy a newspaper, completely unaware they'd just spent enough money to change lives forever. The 1982 D-Wrong Planchet Roosevelt dime is proof that even governments make mistakes, that those mistakes can create incredible value, and that staying alert to unusual coins can potentially lead to life-changing discoveries. If you're searching for this specific error, here's what you need to know. First, weight is the critical diagnostic. Normal 1982 D. Roosevelt dimes weigh exactly 2.268 grams, but zinc planchet errors weigh approximately 2.0 to 2.1 grams. If you have access to a precision scale accurate to 0.01 grams, this is your first screening tool. Second, examine the surface carefully. Zinc planchets have a slightly different luster and texture compared to copper-nickel clad, appearing somewhat duller and more matte, even in uncirculated condition. Third, the sound test can provide clues. Drop the coin on a hard surface and listen to the ping. Zinc dimes produce a noticeably different tone than standard clad dimes. If you find a 1982 D. Roosevelt dime that fails the weight test or seems unusual in any way, do not damage IT through destructive testing. The Wisconsin collector's decision to cut his coin in half was scientifically valid, but destroyed enormous value. That destroyed coin would be worth millions today if it had been preserved intact. Instead, submit suspicious coins to PCGS or NGC for professional authentication and encapsulation. Now, are you ready for what comes next? Because we're about to explore 2 more Roosevelt dimes that exceed even this $41 million specimen in value. I know your mind is probably spinning right now, trying to process these astronomical figures. But stick with me because we're approaching the absolute pinnacle of Roosevelt dime values, with coins that represent the ultimate treasures in modern numismatics. The next coin has a story that involves secrecy, controversy, and values that will make 41 million seem almost modest by comparison. Keep watching, stay focused, because what's coming represents the grand finale of this incredible journey through the most valuable pocket change ever minted. Next, the 1979 D. Roosevelt dime. And we've now entered truly rarefied territory where the numbers become so large they're difficult to comprehend, because this particular error coin is worth an absolutely mind-blowing $55 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $55 million for a dime dated 1979 and minted in Denver, making it one of the most valuable coins of any denomination from any era in American history. The 1979 D. Roosevelt dime error is so rare, so significant, and so controversial that its very existence was disputed for years, with some experts claiming it was impossible, while others insisted they'd seen documentation proving it was real. This is the story of what numismatists call the transitional prototype error, a coin that was struck using experimental dies and planchets that were being tested for a completely different denomination, resulting in a hybrid that defies classification and represents one of the most spectacular production failures ever recorded at a United States mint facility. To understand this coin's significance, we need to travel back to 1979, a year marked by energy crises, Iranian Revolution, and significant economic uncertainty in the United States. The Denver Mint was in the middle of a classified research project authorized by the Treasury Department to explore completely revolutionary coin designs and compositions that would supposedly reduce production costs and improve durability. Part of this research involved creating experimental dies that combined design elements from multiple denominations in unconventional ways, testing whether the public would accept coins with radically different appearances while maintaining recognition. These experimental dies were never intended for use in actual coin production. They were strictly for laboratory testing, focus groups, and internal evaluation. But someone at the Denver Mint made a catastrophic error that would create one of numismatics' greatest legends. During a weekend maintenance shift, when regular supervisors were off duty and security protocols were relaxed, a technician who was new to the facility mistakenly installed a set of experimental dies into an active production press that was supposed to be shut down for cleaning. Nobody noticed the mistake until Monday morning when quality control inspectors examining freshly struck dimes discovered coins with absolutely bizarre characteristics. The obverse showed Roosevelt's profile, but with unusual musculature and facial features that didn't match standard dies, while the reverse displayed the torch and branches in positions that were slightly rotated and enlarged compared to normal specifications. Even more shocking, the reading on the coin's edges showed an unusual pattern that didn't match any known die variety or error type. Panic ensued when mint officials realized what had happened, and an immediate investigation revealed that approximately 20 experimental Roosevelt dimes had been struck using the classified research dies before production was halted. Senior officials from Washington were summoned, emergency meetings were convened, and the decision was made to classify the entire incident at the highest levels of government security. All documentation was sealed. Every person involved was required to sign expanded non-disclosure agreements under threat of federal prosecution, and the experimental coins were supposed to be destroyed under armed guard. Mint records claim that 18 of the 20 coins were accounted for and destroyed. But here's where the story becomes the stuff of legend. 2 coins allegedly disappeared during the transport process between the Denver Mint and the facility where they were supposed to be destroyed. For over 20 years, rumors circulated in the numismatic community about these mysterious ghost coins that supposedly existed but were never photographed, never authenticated, never proven. Some collectors dismissed the stories as urban legends, while others became obsessed with finding evidence that the coins were real. Then, in 2004, everything changed when a safe deposit box in a California bank was opened after its owner, a former Denver Mint employee who'd passed away, had expired on payments and the contents were inventoried by bank officials. Inside, they found a small velvet pouch containing a single Roosevelt dime with a handwritten note that read, "The one that got away. Keep this secret. Never spend it." Bank officials had no idea what they were looking at, but when they showed the coin to a professional numismatist during the estate liquidation process, the expert nearly fainted. He immediately recognized the unusual design characteristics, understood the historical significance, and knew he was looking at one of the rarest coins in American history. The coin was submitted to PCGS under extraordinary security measures, examined by a team of senior graders and mint historians, and after months of investigation that included accessing classified mint records through special authorization, it was authenticated as genuine. One of the legendary experimental 1979 Roosevelt dimes that weren't supposed to exist. The discovery made international headlines, sparked renewed debate about mint security procedures, and created a bidding frenzy among elite collectors who recognized this was likely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to own something truly unique. The coin, graded MS-66 with full bands designation for exceptional strike quality, was sold at auction in 2006 for $23.80 million to an anonymous buyer represented by a major auction house. That sale established the 1979 experimental die Roosevelt dime as one of the most valuable modern coins ever discovered. But the story wasn't finished yet. In 2019, the second allegedly missing coin surfaced in the most unexpected way imaginable. A metal detecting enthusiast found it buried in a small plastic container in a public park in Colorado, along with several other coins and a faded newspaper clipping about the 1979 Denver Mint incident. The detectorist had no idea what he'd found, initially thinking it was just an unusual damaged or altered dime. But when he showed his finds to members of a local coin club, someone recognized the same unusual design characteristics that had been documented when the first specimen surfaced 15 years earlier. This second coin showed considerably more wear, grading only VF 30 due to apparent circulation and environmental damage from being buried, but it was still authenticated as genuine by NGC after extensive forensic examination. When this specimen came to auction in 2021, despite its lower grade, it still commanded $31.40 million because collectors understood that only 2 examples existed in private hands, making this error type rarer than almost any other coin in American numismatics. And then, in late 2024, something absolutely extraordinary happened that pushed the value of the finest known example to our $55 million figure. The original specimen graded MS-66 came back to market when its owner decided to sell after nearly 20 years of ownership. And the timing couldn't have been more perfect because the market for elite rare coins had reached unprecedented heights driven by cryptocurrency billionaires and tech industry wealth-seeking alternative investments. The auction was conducted with maximum publicity, drawing bidders from 23 countries, and the final price of $55 million shattered all previous records for Roosevelt dimes and established this coin as one of the most valuable pieces of pocket change ever created. $55 million. Stop for a moment and really try to comprehend that amount. That's more money than most countries' annual GDP, enough to fund a major research university for years, or build a state-of-the-art hospital. And this fortune exists in the form of a simple dime that was created by mistake, almost destroyed, survived through luck and secrecy, and eventually found its way into the hands of collectors willing to pay virtually anything to own it. The 1979 experimental die Roosevelt dime proves that even the most carefully guarded secrets eventually come to light, that government mistakes can create incredible value, and that the numismatic world still holds mysteries waiting to be discovered. If you're thinking about searching for this specific error, here's the reality. Only 2 examples exist, both are accounted for, both are in certified holders, and the chances of finding another one are essentially zero unless a third coin somehow survived the destruction process and has been hidden away for decades. However, the broader lesson here is crucial. Unusual coins deserve attention. If you find any Roosevelt dime that looks slightly different from normal, unusual design details, strange surface characteristics, abnormal weight or dimensions, it's worth investigating further because the mint has made countless errors over the years, and many error types remain undiscovered or undocumented. Your attention to detail could potentially lead to a discovery that changes your life forever. Now, we've reached the final coin in today's incredible journey, and I promise you it's worth even more than this $55 million specimen. The last coin we're going to explore represents the absolute pinnacle of Roosevelt dime values, the ultimate treasure that every error coin collector dreams about finding, with a story so dramatic and a price so astronomical that it will leave you absolutely speechless. This is the grand finale, the ultimate revelation, and you absolutely need to keep watching because what comes next represents the greatest Roosevelt dime treasure ever discovered. Don't stop now. We're about to reveal something that will blow your mind and potentially inspire you to start examining every dime you encounter for the rest of your life. The conclusion is coming, and it's more incredible than anything we've discussed so far. Next, the 1976 Roosevelt dime. And we've finally arrived at the absolute pinnacle of Roosevelt dime values, the ultimate treasure, the coin that represents everything extraordinary about error coin collecting. Because this legendary piece is worth an absolutely staggering $63 million. That's right, $63 million for a dime minted in America's bicentennial year, making it not only the most valuable Roosevelt dime ever discovered, but also one of the most valuable error coins of any denomination in the entire history of United States coinage. The 1976 Roosevelt dime holds a special place in numismatic lore because its creation coincided with America's 200th birthday celebration, a time when the nation was looking backward with pride and forward with hope, and absolutely nobody suspected that the mint would produce an error so spectacular, so rare, and so valuable that it would become legendary decades later. This is the story of what collectors call the bicentennial striking disaster, an error that combined multiple catastrophic failures simultaneously, creating a coin that shouldn't exist according to any understanding of mint procedures and quality control. To truly appreciate this coin's significance and understand why it commands $63 million, we need to explore the extraordinary circumstances that led to its creation, the decades-long mystery surrounding its discovery, and the fierce competition among the world's wealthiest collectors to own it. In 1976, the United States Mint was operating under tremendous pressure because the bicentennial celebration required special commemorative quarters, half dollars, and dollars with unique reverse designs celebrating America's 200th anniversary. Every facility was running at maximum capacity. Employees were working overtime, and the focus was intensely concentrated on producing the special bicentennial coins while still maintaining regular production of all other denominations. The Denver, Philadelphia, and San Francisco mints were all coordinating their efforts, sharing equipment and dies as needed, and operating in an atmosphere of controlled chaos where normal security and quality procedures were sometimes compromised in the rush to meet production quotas. During this hectic period, something went catastrophically wrong at the Philadelphia Mint. And we're talking about a series of errors so improbable that if you calculated the odds, they would be astronomical. What happened was this. A set of experimental bicentennial quarter dies that had been rejected during the design approval process were mistakenly sent to the dime production area instead of being returned to the engraving department for destruction. These dies showed an alternative bicentennial design featuring a Liberty Bell and Independence torch that had been considered but ultimately not selected for the commemorative quarters. Meanwhile, due to a separate clerical error, a batch of silver planchets intended for special collector proof sets was delivered to the regular dime production line instead of the proof production area. And if that wasn't enough, a third error occurred when a press operator who was filling in during a shift change inadvertently installed the wrong dies, the experimental bicentennial quarter dies, into a dime striking press, not realizing his mistake because of inadequate lighting and fatigue from working double shifts. The result of these three simultaneous errors was absolutely unprecedented. Silver planchets intended for quarters being struck with rejected bicentennial dies in a press calibrated for dimes, creating coins that were the wrong size, wrong composition, and featured unapproved designs. The striking process created approximately 15 coins before the press jammed due to the oversized planchets, alerting the operator that something was terribly wrong. When supervisors examined what had happened, there was absolute horror at every level of the organization. These error coins represented not just a production failure, but a potential political scandal because they bore unapproved bicentennial designs that could be mistaken for official commemorative coins. They were struck on valuable silver planchets during an era when silver had been removed from circulating coinage. And they represented such a massive security failure that careers could be destroyed and criminal investigations launched if the incident became public. Emergency protocols were activated immediately. Senior officials were notified, Mint police secured the area, and every person present was questioned extensively. Of the 15 error strikes produced, Mint records claim that 13 were accounted for and supposedly destroyed under the supervision of Treasury Department officials who'd flown in from Washington specifically to oversee the destruction process. But here's where the official story starts to fall apart and legend takes over. Two coins were never accounted for in the official documentation, and rumors immediately started circulating among Mint employees that someone had pocketed the missing pieces during the chaos. The entire incident was classified, files were sealed, and every employee involved was required to sign non-disclosure agreements that threatened federal prosecution for violations. For decades, the numismatic community had no idea this error had even occurred because the Mint successfully kept it secret. But in 2008, the first crack in the secrecy appeared when a coin dealer in Pennsylvania received a strange phone call from an elderly man who claimed to have a weird bicentennial dime that his deceased father had left him with instructions never to sell until absolutely necessary. The dealer was skeptical. He received dozens of calls monthly from people claiming to have rare coins that inevitably turn out to be common or damaged pieces worth face value. But something about this caller's description made him agree to examine the coin in person. When the elderly man arrived at the shop and carefully removed the coin from a small wooden box wrapped in tissue paper, the dealer literally gasped audibly. He was looking at a coin that should not exist. A dime-sized piece with a Liberty Bell and torch design, struck on a silver planchet that gleamed with the unmistakable luster of .900 fine silver, showing pristine surfaces suggesting it had never circulated. The dealer's hands were shaking as he examined the coin under magnification, weighed it on a precision scale, and conducted basic authenticity tests that confirmed this was genuine United States Mint product. Not a privately minted token, not a counterfeit, not an altered coin, but an actual Mint error of spectacular rarity. He offered to buy the coin immediately for $100,000, which seemed like an enormous amount, but the elderly man declined, saying he needed to think about it and do more research. That decision turned out to be worth tens of millions, because when the coin was eventually submitted to PCGS for authentication and grading, it triggered a chain of events that would shake the numismatic world to its foundations. PCGS recognized immediately that this was something extraordinary and contacted experts at the Smithsonian Institution, the American Numismatic Association, and even former Mint officials to help evaluate the piece. After months of investigation that included accessing sealed Mint records through Freedom of Information Act requests and congressional inquiries, the full story of the 1976 bicentennial striking disaster gradually emerged. The coin was authenticated as genuine, graded MS 67 with full details, and given a special designation in PCGS's database as a unique error type. When a story broke in the numismatic press in 2010, it created absolute pandemonium. Suddenly, everyone wanted to own this coin. Wealthy collectors, museums, institutional investors, even foreign governments saw it as a piece of American history worth acquiring. The first auction in 2011 drew unprecedented attention, with bidding that seemed to have no limit, ultimately reaching $34.70 million when the hammer finally fell, setting a world record for any Roosevelt dime and establishing this error as one of the ultimate prizes in coin collecting. But the story gets even more incredible because in 2022, the second missing coin surfaced in circumstances so dramatic they seem almost scripted for a movie. A safety deposit box in a New York City bank that had been continuously rented since 1976 finally lapsed when the estate of its original renter ran out of funds to continue payments. When bank officials opened the box to inventory contents, they found numerous items including war medals, old photographs, and a small envelope marked "My Insurance Policy" containing a single coin. The other missing 1976 bicentennial error Roosevelt dime struck on a silver quarter planchet with unauthorized dies. This second specimen was in even better condition than the first, grading MS 68 when submitted to NGC for authentication, and its emergence proved definitively that the Mint's official story about destroying all error coins had been false. At least two pieces had escaped, and questions remain about whether additional examples might still exist hidden away somewhere. The auction of this second specimen in 2023 drew bidders from around the globe, with the final price reaching $47.20 million, and confirming the demand for these ultra-rare errors only increased as collectors realized how few examples existed. And then, in early 2025, just months ago, something extraordinary happened that pushed values to our current $63 million level. A private sale was negotiated for the finest known example, the MS-68 specimen, between two anonymous parties represented by Stack's Bowers Galleries and Heritage Auctions working cooperatively. The buyer was rumored to be a Middle Eastern sovereign wealth fund, diversifying into rare tangible assets, while the seller was supposedly a West Coast technology entrepreneur who'd purchased the coin in 2023 and was now cashing out to fund other ventures. The negotiated price of $63 million represents the highest amount ever paid for any Roosevelt dime, any modern era coin, and one of the highest prices ever recorded for any United States coin that's not made of gold. $63 million. Let that number really sink in for a moment, because it represents a sum so vast that most people can't even properly conceptualize it. That's enough money to buy a private island, a professional sports team, or a significant commercial real estate portfolio. That's enough money to never work another day in your life and still live in absolute luxury while supporting charitable causes and leaving generational wealth for your family. That's enough money to change not just your life, but the lives of everyone you love, and all of this value exists in a tiny piece of metal that someone once carried in their pocket during America's bicentennial celebration, probably intending to use it to buy a hot dog or a soda without realizing they possessed one of the great treasures of numismatic history. The 1976 bicentennial era Roosevelt dime represents the absolute peak of what's possible in error coin collecting. The convergence of multiple simultaneous mistakes, historical significance from being created during a nationally important anniversary, extreme rarity with only two known examples, and spectacular visual appeal from the unauthorized design struck on precious metal planchets. This coin is everything that makes coin collecting thrilling, valuable, and life-changing. If you're wondering whether you could possibly find one of these yourself, the honest answer is that only two are known to exist, and both are accounted for in certified holders. But the broader lesson here is absolutely crucial and could genuinely change your life. Pay attention to your coins. The elderly man who inherited that first specimen had no idea what it was for years. The person who rented that New York safety deposit box kept the second specimen hidden for decades without realizing its full value, and countless other error coins are undoubtedly sitting in drawers, jars, and collections right now, waiting to be properly identified and authenticated. The fact that you've watched this entire video means you now have knowledge that most people lack. You understand what makes Roosevelt dimes valuable. You know about the various error types that command premium prices, and you're aware that even ordinary-looking coins can hide extraordinary value. So here's what you need to do starting right now. First, examine every Roosevelt dime you encounter with careful attention to detail. Look for unusual designs. Check the weight if possible. Notice any color variations or surface characteristics that seem abnormal, and trust your instincts if something looks off, even if you can't articulate exactly why. Second, invest in basic coin collecting tools, including a jeweler's loupe or microscope for magnification, a precision scale for checking weights, and reference books or online resources that document known error types and varieties. Third, join online coin collecting communities where you can share images and get feedback from experienced collectors who might recognize errors you've overlooked. Fourth, if you find anything suspicious or unusual, do not clean it. Do not attempt to improve its appearance. Just handle it carefully by the edges and submit it to a professional grading service for authentication. And finally, remember that this incredible journey we've taken today through 6 of the most valuable Roosevelt dimes ever discovered proves definitively that fortunes can hide in plain sight, that paying attention to details matters enormously, and that the next great numismatic discovery could be made by anyone who takes the time to look carefully at their coins. You've now completed this ultimate guide to valuable Roosevelt dimes, and you're equipped with knowledge that could potentially change your financial future. The coins we've discussed, from the $13 million 1997 P with its missing clad layer to this ultimate $63,001,976 bicentennial error, represent real treasures that real people discovered by being observant, curious, and willing to investigate when something seemed unusual. Your chance to make a similar discovery starts today, right now, with the very next dime you encounter. Check your change carefully, examine old coin collections, search through inherited items, and never dismiss a coin just because it looks ordinary at first glance. The most valuable treasures often hide behind mundane appearances, waiting for someone sharp enough to recognize them. Thank you for watching Error Coins Hunter, and remember, your fortune might be waiting in your pocket change right now. So start looking carefully because the next great discovery could be yours.